The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Game Podcast Network is brought to you by Fantasy. Sign the promo code SGPN, score up to $1,000 bonus cash. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Get your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgames.com, Rhythm, sportsgames.com, RITHMM. Make sure to also enter the free roll football contest with up to $3,500 in prizes up for grabs. Go to sportsgamepodcast.com/free roll to enter today. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It is currently Tuesday, September 3rd, roughly 2:40 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. The second episode of the night. If you missed the first episode, we ended up doing a women's quarterfinals match preview for the US Open about an hour or two ago. So once again, 2 episodes tonight. This is episode number 2. So we're going to go through the men's quarterfinal matches in a little while. Before we get into that, I do want to recap what happened in the round of 16. Before we even get to that, I want to take care of some housekeeping. I want to remind you once again to like, subscribe on YouTube, and a reminder to don't forget to leave a rating or review on Spotify or Apple if you're still listening to the podcast audio only. Point is, though, most of you, I think, by now are on YouTube, so welcome aboard. I know that the last episode had about 600 views, so thank you for helping us get there. Let's break 1,000 on the next one, or at least one of the episodes in the future. A reminder, though, that if you are new to the channel, first of all, welcome. Hopefully you enjoy the content. Besides that, a reminder that if you are one of the people that subscribe, thank you, appreciate it. If not, what are you waiting for? Pointers, though, don't forget to leave some feedback in the comment section, and also a reminder that you can catch us live on either Twitter or on YouTube if you do want to avoid getting the videos and you'd rather actually interact with me in live time. We have a live stream, we have the comment section live, and I will answer any questions that pop up in there. A reminder, check out the merch store as well. A lot of great tennis gambling podcasts in the I'd say a lot of great tennis gambling podcast merchandise in the merch store, and we do have a lot of high-quality shirts, sweatshirts, and mugs in the merch store, all affordable, and I recommend getting yourself something there. A reminder as well to check out the other podcasts of the network, and particularly with football around the corner. You have college football starting already, and you also have the NFL starting on Thursday with a matchup between the Chiefs and the Ravens. Check out the Sports Game Podcasts because Sean and Ryan are back breaking down and picking every NFL game against the spread like they've done since 2011. And a reminder, check out the free roll contest that we have. In football, up to $3,500 in cash up for grabs. And a reminder, sign up at sportsgamepodcast.com/free roll, sportsgamepodcast.com/free roll. Time to get into the recap of the lock and dog picks for the round of 16 matches. Now, I did do the same exact recap in the women's episode, but I'll go more in depth on this one. Starting off with the lock, not even close. We had Draper and Makic over 3.5 sets of -152. Makic was phenomenal. For the first couple rounds, we had him to win -1 sets against Goffin. He won in straight sets. And then at some point between that match and this match, the man forgot how to play tennis because he was awful. Draper absolutely killed him. It was so bad that I was wondering if Makic was injured. That's how bad he looked. But Draper dominated from start to finish. That was never close. Draper looked good, but to be honest, he wasn't otherworldly. Just seemed like Makic couldn't keep the ball in play. He had no game plan, and he was 3-0 lifetime against Draper entering that matchup. So definitely weird, but either way, I picked up a loss there. Really wasn't even close. We were kind of hoping for Makic to retire mid-match. That's how bad the actual play looked over the course of that match. But for the dog, nice winner with Sinner in straight sets at +125. Not easy. First 2 sets went to breakers. Paul was up a double break at first, then he immediately gave it back, and you saw Sinner hold to win the breaker pretty convincingly, though, in the first set. Second set was not easy. As you went to a breaker, Sinner did have a set point or two and did not convert, but you went to a breaker, and Paul had 2 looks at second serves from Sinner, and unfortunately for him, he shanked both returns, or I should say he had unforced errors on both returns, and then Sinner eventually did win the next point to get the mini break to win the set. So definitely a sweat there in the second set, but then once Sinner got the job done, you knew Paul was done. He was, as he immediately went down a ton, and he lost 6-1 in the final set. So not easy, got the job done, though. Nice plus money winner there, and we'll look for a sweep here in this episode. Now, to get into the actual recap, a reminder before the women's episode that we just recorded, we have more lock and dog picks. So for the next episode, we will recap both the men's and the women's lock and dog picks. But if you want some bonus picks, have the women's quarters picks for you well in the previous episode. Anyway, time to get into the actual recap of the round of 16. Overall, a great day for us on Sunday. And then on Monday, not great. We were missing some lines, though, so we really kind of had to skip over a couple of matches. But overall, not that great on Monday. For Sunday, we got basically everything right. We did think Rublev was going to beat Dimitrov, but we liked the over as our favorite play, and that got there as the match went to 5 sets, and Dimitrov got the job done 6-3 in the final set. Rublev, it seems like every time he's got a shot in a high-profile match to let's just say, win a big point that might swing momentum, he always hits an unforced error. And that kind of happened against Dimitrov because he had a couple big points when he was already down a break in the fifth set, and you ended up seeing Dimitrov convert his only breakpoint chance with an unforced error by Rublev, and then Rublev had 2 breakpoints in the 2-4 game. What do you know? 2 unforced errors, and Rublev again ended up squandering a couple of good opportunities. Then Dimitrov held and won 6-3 in the final. But classic Rublev, honestly. He had a bit of another temper tantrum there early. Dimitrov was coasting, then Rublev came back, and then, of course, Rublev's unforced errors came back in the fifth, and Dimitrov was steady enough to get the job done to win. I really didn't think Dimitrov was, like, lights out in the fifth set. It seemed like Rublev kept punting shots into the net, and it seemed like Rublev was really just forfeiting a bunch of free points to Dimitrov, and he said thank you as he won in 5. Fritz beat Ruud in 4. Did like Fritz minus 1.5 sets in that match. Did like the over as well, 3.5 sets. Thought it'd be a close match, and I did like Fritz, though, based on form. Got the job done as he won in 4. So nice win there for Fritz, and he got revenge for the French Open loss that he had against Ruud, and I believe that's his first ever win against Ruud. He is now, I believe, 1-3 a lifetime. Point is, though, we did have the right read there. Fritz in good form. Ruud didn't impress me too much against Chang, and Fritz's overall serve was the story, as Ruud's serve constantly was involved in deuces, and you saw Fritz eventually break through when he had enough opportunities. But to go through the actual breakpoint chances here, you saw Ruud, who ended up having 6, and you saw Fritz have 10. Fritz broke 4 times, though, and Ruud only broke once, which was in the first set. So no breaks for Ruud in the final 3 sets combined. Not ideal there, but nice win for Fritz. For the next match, we liked Zverev basically in 4. We like the over 3.5 sets because Zverev's been dropping sets left and right. Nakashima won the first set, kind of like the Ruud Fritz match where one guy won the first set and then he got buried in the last 3 sets as Zverev won 6-1, 6-2, 6-2. Pretty straightforward. Kind of followed the head-to-head script as you have seen all the meetings between them go in favor of Zverev. Usually the first set was competitive, but at the end of the day, you tended to see some length, and we saw it as it ended up going to 4 sets. Did like the over 3.5 sets, though, and that ended up cashing. For the last match, we like the over, and we also liked Tiafoe money line. We thought that Tiafoe, potentially with both players to win a set, was a good angle, and that worked out as Tiafoe did win in 4. Brutal choke job by Popyrin in the second set there. He had 3 set points on his serve, and he blew it. So that was pretty rough. 40 love serving for a 1-1 set opportunity, and then he blew it, and then eventually he ended up losing in the breaker. Then he responded. He won the third set 6-2, and then Tiafoe buried it in the fourth, winning 6-3. So I thought Popyrin played fine, but just didn't win enough big points. Tiafoe was great for the first couple of sets in particular, especially when he was down 40 love in that final return game, or what we thought was going to be the final return game. It just seemed like a classic spot where Tiafoe was going to basically just rip a forehand into the net or long and just walk over to the changeover into his chair and to kind of regroup for the third. He didn't do that. He actually hung in there and he ended up breaking back, which was kind of shocking. But either way, Tiafoe served very well. Did end up winning 77% of the first serve points and 57% of the second serve points, where Popyrin only won 44% of the second serve points. So both guys were very good first serve-wise. Popyrin did win 83% of the first serves, but it just seemed like the second serve was a liability for Popyrin, and it was really not a liability for Tiafoe, as that was the main, I'd say, differentiator between both players. But you ended up seeing Tiafoe break 3 times. Both guys actually broke 3 times in this match, but Tiafoe ended up having to actually fight off more break points. Popyrin ended up having 9 break points, and Tiafoe had 5, but they both broke 3 times apiece. So pretty fun matchup. The total points, by the way, for each guy was very close, despite Tiafoe winning in 4. Tiafoe won 3 more points in the entire match, 120 to 117. So close matchup, could have gone either way. Popyrin really choked away that second set, which might have eventually swayed momentum to get him to win the match, but it did not happen as Tiafoe won in 4, and we ended up winning with the Tiafoe money line as well as both players to win a set. So nice overall match there for us. I'm trying to think of anything else that was really worth talking about for takeaways. Not really. It was fun. You had no straight set wins, and that was a pretty fun day of tennis. Then you had whatever it was on Monday, which was the opposite because it sucked. The first 2 matches were unbearable. In fact, they were basically exhibition matches. They were a joke. Draper beat Makic, only losing 6 games the entire match. Then Medvedev said, hold my beer. I'm going to only drop 4 games against Borges in the entire round of 16 match. So the first two matches on the card were absolutely terrible, and you ended up seeing the favorite win comfortably. For the third match, that was interesting, as de Minaur won with a bagel in the first set, and you thought, here we go again, but Thompson came back and won the second set 6-3, and then de Minaur did win 6-3, 7-5. So nice win there for de Minaur, who's looked sharp since coming back from injury that he suffered in Wimbledon, and he missed the Olympics because of it for the singles, but it's nice to see him healthy, and he's now in a golden opportunity to potentially make it into a Grand Slam semi. As for the last match, we had Sinner in straight sets, and that worked out at plus 125. Point is, though, Sinner did get the job done. Not easy, as I said before, breakers in the first two sets, but he ended up getting the job done comfortably in the third. De Minaur, we didn't really cover. I did like de Minaur and both players to win a set. I think I mentioned that I liked the over in sets there as well, so that worked out. Point is, though, an overall pretty good round of 16 for us. Did split the lock and dog, but either way, look for a sweep here in the quarterfinals. Before we get into the preview of the actual four matches, I want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Monarch Fantasy because they have a pick'em, and if you do play the pick'em, you have a chance to win 1,000 times your entry. And the NFL's back. They have a ton of pick'em specials to get you started. Get any specials and boosts on Netflix entries. A reminder that if you do want to go for anything involving the Thursday night game between the Chiefs and the Ravens, mentioned Rashee Rice before. I'll try to think if I want to throw out another option here. You know what? I'll go with Lamar rushing yards in this one. I feel like with Derrick Henry now in the backfield, it's going to open up some opportunities in the read option game, and maybe Lamar's going to scramble for a decent amount of yards with pass plays in general, but give me Lamar rushing yards higher in this matchup. Sign up, though, with the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and a first-time positive offer up to $100 bonus catch on a fantasy promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping what happened in the round 16. Now it's time to talk about the quarterfinals. Starting off with the first match on Tuesday, you have a matchup which should be a pretty fun one, as you have a matchup between the likes of Fritz and Zverev at about 1:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Zverev's minus 175, Fritz is plus 155. For the spread here, you have minus 2.5 for Zverev, plus 2.5 for Fritz. The over-under is between 40.5 and 41.5. For set spread, though, Zverev minus 1.5 sets is plus 115. Fritz plus 1.5 sets is minus 145. The over 3.5 sets is minus 215. And the over 4.5 sets is plus 195. We have a rematch of Wimbledon, which we ended up seeing Fritz win. Not easy, though. Did go 5. Fritz ended up going down. Fritz won the first two sets, actually, and then immediately lost the next 3, but they were competitive 6-4, 7-6, 6-3. The main reminder, though, of that matchup, though, was Zverev was compromised physically. You could tell that he wasn't moving as well as he normally does, but nice win for Fritz as he finally got revenge against Zverev, who had kind of owned him in the head-to-head in the last couple of meetings. As the head-to-head is close, but Zverev had won 3 straight meetings in straight sets before Fritz did win in Wimbledon in 5. So the point is, Zverev did seem a bit compromised physically based on the mobility in that match, and you saw Fritz win in 5. But Zverev has been dropping sets in the event. He dropped a set to Nakashima, dropped a set to Echeverry, dropped a set to ended up dropping a set to Martera, Did beat Moore in straight sets. Almost lost second set, though, in a breaker. So Zverev has been dropping sets, but he has been doing very well after losing the first set in particular, as he ended up losing the first set to Echeverry and Nakashima. So if you want to go for Fritz to win the first set, I don't mind it if you want to go for that angle, because we've seen Zverev stumble out of the gates for the last couple days. Fritz, though, did lose the first set to Ruud. That's the only set he's dropped in the entire event. Beat Comensagna in 3, beat Berrettini in 3, and beat Ugo Carabelli in 3. But he has been very good. So I think Fritz is definitely dangerous in this matchup. But if you're asking me where I think this match is going to go, I would lean to the over. I definitely see a match that's going to go 4 or 5. But I do think I'm going to go with Zverev in this one. I think Fritz can get it done, but I really can't ignore the fact that Fritz was pretty compromised physically. I'd say he was at 70% health, just based on mobility. But I do think with him being somewhat compromised and still winning the first 2 sets against Fritz on grass, I just think that Zverev is the better player. I think you're going to see a matchup that might have some ebbs and flows with it. So you might see, once again, one guy look sharp in the first set, Zverev starts off flat, and then ends up coming back and winning in potentially 4 or 5. That's a possibility, but I think for the sake of this matchup, I agree with Fritz being the dog here, but I don't want to lay 175. So I think I'm going to go with the potential game spread instead. I don't mind Zverev minus 1.5 games. I like minus 135. That can intrigue me. I don't mind Zverev to win and both players to win a set at plus 145. Then that's a pretty good price as well. If you want to go for the signature play that we had a bunch of success with last year with the dog prop, I'm not going to give that out as my dog, but once again, if you want to go with the first set money line combo, Fritz to win the first set and Zverev to win the match is plus 390. That I don't mind because Zverev has dropped the first set in 2 straight matches. So if you think Zverev's going to win and you don't want to pay minus 180, give or take, minus 190, I think you can find some value. Maybe taking Fritz to win the first set, then Zverev to come back, and you can't get that at plus 390. But give me Zverev to win. I don't mind the games here. I think he's the better player. I think Fritz has been in very good form, so it should be entertaining. But I think that Zverev is a little bit too rock solid, at least most of the time, and I do think that Fritz is going to struggle to break through. And I think that at some point, the rally intolerance might end up coming back to bite Fritz over the course of this matchup. So I'm going to lean to Zverev. Don't mind the over, though, and I do think that you can find some value going with Fritz to win the first set, Zverev to win the match at plus 390. Anyway, moving on to the second match on a Tuesday, you have Dimitrov taking on Tiafoe. So for this one, you have Dimitrov at minus 145. You have Tiafoe at plus 145. For the game spread here, minus 2.5 for Dimitrov, plus 2.5 for Tiafoe. For the over-under, around 38.5 or 39.5 for set spread. By the way, I forgot to mention in the Fritz match, thought about maybe going minus 1.5 sets for Zverev at plus 115. Plus 115 is intriguing, but I'm probably going to stay away from that. Anyway, point is though, for this matchup, you have the over 3.5 sets at minus 205 in the first in the Tiafoe Dimitrov match. Over 4.5 sets is plus 200. For the set spread here, you have Dimitrov minus 1.5 sets at plus 120, Tiafoe plus 1.5 sets at minus 150, and vice versa. You have Tiafoe minus 1.5 sets at plus 240. Now, you ended up seeing Dimitrov face off against Tiafoe in a Grand Slam 5 years ago in the Australian Open, and Tiafoe did win in 4. Every set, though, was either 7-5 or 7-6. They faced off, that was the only hardcore Grand Slam meeting they've had. Faced off last year in Wimbledon, and Dimitrov killed Tiafoe, won 6-2, 6-3, 6-2. However, Tiafoe, we know, has been in better form recently, as he made the final in Cincinnati, and he's kind of parlayed that into a good showing here in Flushing, so we'll see how he does in this matchup. However, for the sake of the overall path of both players, I do think Dimitrov looked a lot more solid in the event, as he ended up beating everybody in straight sets in the first 3 rounds. Beat Griekspoor, beat Jakarta, and beat Jacquet. Not the greatest competition in the first 2 rounds, but did beat Griekspoor comfortably, who was looking pretty decent so far in the event. Then he ended up winning the first 2 sets against Rublev, and he eventually won in 5. As for Tiafoe, he's had a pretty favorable draw. Faced off against Kovacevic, dropped the set. Faced off against Shevchenko, who was in really bad form, got injured, and ended up winning in the 3rd set via retirement. Beat Shelton in 5, not easy, but that was definitely a good win. Shelton was playing well for the first couple rounds, but had a pretty rough overall year up to this point. And then he ended up beating Papirin, which was not Djokovic, so pretty lucky there for Tiafoe. Point is, though, it has been a pretty, I'd say, decent draw for Tiafoe. I'll put it that way. Not the easiest in the world, but could have been a lot harder. So for this matchup, I think I am expecting Dimitrov to win, but I don't want to lay 145. I think I have to go with the over in this one. I think you're looking at what should be a 4 or 5 setter. I think it's going to be a war between these two. I know that Dimitrov killed him in Wimbledon about a year ago. Tiafoe, though, has looked sharp on these courts, and I do think that he can definitely extract some unforced errors from Dimitrov, but I do think Dimitrov is the better player as far as I'm concerned. So give me a balancing act here. Give me what should be a fun matchup. The value, in my opinion, for the sake of my prediction, would be Tiafoe in 5 if I had to guess a potential long shot value play for the exact outcome. I think Tiafoe in 5 makes sense. We know that he's going to tend to be involved in some marathons, and I do think that it's going to bode well for this prediction. But I think that if I had to go with who I think is the better player, it would be Dimitrov. Dimitrov, though, we know can choke in some big moments, and Tiafoe has been in a U.S. Open semi before. So he's been here before, actually, which might benefit Tiafoe. For the sake of this matchup, if you wanted my thoughts on the exact script, Tiafoe 3-2 is about plus 550. I don't mind that, but I prefer the over as my main play here. I see a close matchup. The matchup in the Australian Open, the only hardcore Grand Slam meeting, had 4 sets, all 12-plus games in each set. So that was flying over the total. Give me the over for the games, my main play here. And what I think is kind of a coin flip, lean to Tiafoe for the value, but I think Dimitrov's probably going to win. But I'll go with the over 38.5 games, and I will go with the over 4.5 sets at plus 200. Give me a marathon that I think is going to be a pretty entertaining match that's going to really be unpredictable. And hopefully you end up capitalizing on, in my opinion, what should be a pretty open match. Moving on to the matches on Wednesday. You have Draper taking on de Minaur. For this one, Draper is around plus 110. De Minaur is around minus 137. For the over-under in this one, you have 36.5, give or take. That's about minus 130 on the over. For the game spread here, minus 2.5 for de Minaur, plus 2.5 for Draper. You can't find 1.5, though, if you want that instead of minus 120 in favor of de Minaur. For the over 3.5 sets, you have around minus 185. For the under 3.5 sets, plus 155. For the set spread, Draper minus 2.5 sets is plus 325. Draper minus 1.5 sets is plus 135. Draper plus 1.5 sets is minus 165. And Draper minus 1.5 sets is available at plus 195. So for the head-to-head, it's been competitive, but it's been the same every time. As you have seen, all three meetings in the head-to-head end in a de Minaur victory, but all three meetings did also not end in straight sets. So a lot of competitive overall battles here. We saw them have a war in Acapulco early. Then Draper ran out of gas and retired down 4-0 in the third set. Tokyo, though, was an absolute war as Draper won the first set 6-4. Then you saw de Minaur win 7-6, 7-6. That was in last year in October. So pretty fun match there on hard court. Faced off in Wimbledon in 2022, and de Minaur did win in 4. So point is for this matchup, Draper's been phenomenal in the event, as Draper has not dropped a set yet, did beat Zhang with a retirement in the third, still a win nonetheless, beat Diaz Acosta in straight sets, beat Dzanchel because he beat Alcaraz and ended up beating Makic, who forgot how to play tennis for about 2 hours. So Draper's had a pretty easy path, to be honest. Zhang can be dangerous at times, but he was injured and he looked awful throughout the match. Diaz Acosta is a clay specialist. Dzanchel, we know, is a head case, but he had one glorious day where he beat Alcaraz, but he's never won an ATP title, and we know that he has the history of being a bit of a choker. Kind of went back to challengers going into the U.S. Open to regain form, so he's had a mess of a 2024 season. Not going to overreact to the one Alcaraz win. Still a really average win, as far as I'm concerned, for Draper, but he did win in straight sets. Makic I was impressed with, but watching the match, Makic was just horrible. I didn't think Draper really did anything. It just felt like Makic was punting points left and right because he couldn't really keep the ball in play, and that resulted in a nice win. As for de Minaur, you could argue he hasn't really played anybody either because he ended up facing off against Giron. Decent win there. Virtanen in straight sets beat Evans, who kind of regained form. He was also having a really bad year in 2024, so still a win nonetheless. Did win via bagel in the final 2 sets. And Thompson's had a good year, especially the last couple months. So a nice 4-set win there. The argument, though, is to step up in competition for both guys. And how do I think the match is going to unfold? Now, Draper's been really good. We know that he has a lot of upside. The issue is the man can't stay healthy. If he could stay healthy, he won his first ATP title this year, and he's got a lot more in store for him. He's really good. However, de Minaur is 3-0, and I do think that it's tough to win a rally contest against de Minaur. That's kind of what I'm expecting. I just think it's a bad matchup for Draper because I do think you're looking at both guys wanting to partake in 30-plus shot rallies all the time. And de Minaur has the court coverage to get there to really track down a lot of balls. But I think you're looking at de Minaur, who's better as far as I'm concerned. He looks fully healthy. I do like the money line at minus 135. I think that until Draper beats de Minaur, I'm going to pick de Minaur. And he's also been in big matches before. Draper really has not the biggest match of his career, so you could argue nerves might play a factor. But de Minaur, the longer this match goes, the more I trust him because he's been involved in marathons, and Draper has a history of durability and some stamina issues like we saw in Acapulco in their last head-to-head meeting. So for this one, I am going to go with the favorite here, but if you want to get some extra value, I don't mind de Minaur and both players to win a set. That'll be plus money if you want to turn that minus 135 into probably like plus 150. I don't mind that. Caesars doesn't have it yet, which has the best price for that market, so I'm going to wait on it, but I don't mind that play as well. For the over-under, pretty tough to tell because I think each set could be lopsided. You might see a couple 6-2, 6-3s in here because both guys service-wise are not amazing. So I think I'm going to stay away from the total. I think you might actually end up getting maybe a 4-setter that goes like under 38.5, for example, which is an all total of minus 130 on the under. It is possible that you end up getting there where you have a bunch of 6-3s and the match ends up landing 36. That is a possibility. I'm going to stay away from the total, but I think you're going to see at least 4 sets. De Minaur has dropped at least 1 set quite often. I'll just put it this way. It's been quite common for de Minaur to drop sets. He has dropped at least 1 set in 3 to 4 matches here. So with that being the case, give me the over 3.5 sets, which is juice, but I still think it's a good parlay piece, and I don't mind de Minaur to win with both players to win a set at a decent plus money price. Moving on, though, to easily the match of the round. You have Sinner against Medvedev. a rematch of the Australian Open final this past year, and a rematch of the Wimbledon match that we ended up seeing a couple of months ago. Now, for this actual matchup, Sinner's obviously favored, which is to no surprise. But for the actual price, he is around minus 245. Medvedev's plus 205 for the game spread, minus 4.5 for Sinner, plus 4.5 for Medvedev. The over-under in games is 36.5. For the actual set spread here, Sinner minus 1.5 sets, minus 130. Medvedev plus 1.5 sets is even money. And for the over 3.5 sets, minus 165. The over 4.5 sets is plus 240. Now, I will point out they faced off 2 times in their careers in Grand Slams, both meetings this year. Faced off in the Australian Open final and in Wimbledon. Both matches did go to 5 sets. Now, Medvedev won the one in Wimbledon. Sinner won the one in the Australian Open. Obviously, that was the final. But the point is both guys tend to kill each other in Grand Slams. But it's not just Grand Slams, by the way. Going to the last couple head-to-head meetings, it is worth mentioning that if you actually go through it, 4 of the last 5 head-to-head meetings did not end in straight sets. So you're probably expecting a marathon here, and I think I'm going to bet that accordingly. Now, for the actual price, should Sinner be favored? Yes. Should he be minus 245? In my opinion, no. I think Medvedev's quite live to win this, actually. I think Medvedev has been fantastic for the entire event. Now, Sinner ended up falling behind a double break against Paul because he couldn't hit a forehand for the first 20 minutes. But Sinner has been fine. I think he's had a very easy path. Both guys really have, if you want to be honest about it. So to go through the path of both players, Sinner ended up beating the likes of McDonald in 4, who's had a really bad year. He was down a set in a break, and then he dominated from that point forward. Mickelson, though, was fresh off of the Winston-Salem final, and he kind of never recovered from it. But Sinner beat him, only dropping 6 games. Beat O'Connell. So once again, McDonald, Mickelson, and O'Connell as your first 3 rounds. That's a gift for a draw. And then he beat Paul. Paul's been a good player this year. He won an ATP title or 2. So that's a good win. But still, point is, Sinner was not exactly dominant in that matchup, and he probably should have dropped at least 1 set. So he has not looked extremely comfortable, but he was good enough to beat Paul. Now, for Medvedev, he has played absolutely nobody. Beat Lajovic in 4, beat Morozin in 3, beat Kaboli in 3. I like Kaboli, but still, beat him in straight sets. A pretty decent draw there for the 3rd round. And beat Borges, the absolute gift of all gifts, for a 4th round matchup, and he dropped 4 games the entire match. 6-0, 6-1 the first 2 sets. Oof. So the point is, both guys haven't really faced off against anybody besides Paul, I guess, for Sinner. But I think that based on Medvedev's recent success, he got killed against Sinner in the last hardcourt meeting in Miami, but he came back and he beat him in Wimbledon. He is up 7-5 in the head-to-head, so a lot of it is front-loaded, as Sinner has won, I believe, 5 of the last 6 meetings. But the point is, you saw Medvedev win the most recent one, and we know Medvedev can keep it close. He's been great in the event, and I think that Sinner's forehand, if it ends up struggling again, or if he has a hard time landing the first serves, Medvedev, I do think, will be able to make this match interesting. I see an absolute war. I think it goes to 5 sets personally. I'll lean to Medvedev, but I think it's going to be an absolute slugfest. Give me the value. If Sinner wins, I wouldn't be shocked. But plus 205, and what I think is basically, I don't want to say a coin flip, but I think it should be Sinner minus 140 if I had the price of myself. I really don't see much separating these 2 players, and the fact that both Grand Slam meetings went to 5 tells you there's really not much separating these guys. So I'm going to go with the dog here at plus 205 in the upset, but I am going to go with the over as my favorite play at 36.5 games. I see a lot of value there. I see probably a breaker, maybe more, but I think you're getting at least 4 sets with what should be a pretty decent service display by both guys because they're pretty good servers. So give me the over in that one as my favorite play. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the preview of the 4 quarterfinal matches on the men's side for the U.S. Open. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. However, before we get into the actual lock and dog picks, I want to remind you once again, they're brought to you by Rhythm because they can help you with your football betting. They can help you build your own model, or you could use one of theirs that they already have. They have leaderboards. You could take one of the top performing models from the leaderboard and use that for future games. But a reminder, they also give you the ability to get AI predictions on betting money line, spread total, and props. And a reminder that they can also give you a bunch of stats, research, and trends to give you more betting insight. And they're also on the under in the Colorado and North Dakota State game, which ended up landing 57. Total was 59.5, which is a nice under there. But if you want to actually give it a try and you're curious, but you don't want to pay for it, you can get a free trial. Claim or send a free trial today by going to sportscamp.com, Rhythm, sportscamp.com, just RITHMM. We're also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the MLB, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And price on the Game Time actually go down closer to game time. A reminder, they have killer last minute deals all on prices and views from receipt. And the lowest price guarantee does guarantee definitely the best deal that you could possibly imagine for that particular event that you want to go to. Game Time, though, does take the guesswork out of buying tickets. And a reminder, the image of seat views feature is my favorite feature because you can see the view you would be getting from your seat before you spend your money. So you can avoid any potential obstructions or poles or anything that's in your line of view to make sure you have the best experience when you go to the ballpark. A reminder, though, they have other stuff besides baseball. They also have concerts. They have basketball. They have hockey. Really any sport you can think of. They have tickets there on Game Time. But download the Game Time app, create an account. You use code SGPN for $20 off first purchase. Again, terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code SGPN. $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing the 4 quarterfinal matches for Tuesday and Wednesday on the men's side. Time to get into the lock and dog picks for the show. Now, I will admit, for the actual lock and dog, there was a bit of overlap, but it's slightly different. For the lock, they're going to go back to that last match between Medvedev and Sinner. I am going to go with the over 36.5 games at -115. Couple reasons why I'm going to go with this. First reason, you've seen a lot of competitive head-to-head meetings in the past. 4 of the last 5 meetings did not end in straight sets, so I'm expecting another marathon between these two. Plus, there's been at least one 7-5 or 7-6 set in 6 of the last 8 head-to-head meetings, so there's at least one set that goes distance, which bodes well for the over. In theory, 36.5, you don't need to go to 4 sets. You can win if you end up getting like a 7-6, 7-6, 7-5, for example. That goes over. The point is, it is possible to get there just by seeing good serving by both guys. Probably goes 4 or 5, but I think that there's value. And the fact that you can, in theory, get there in straight sets as a fail-safe, I do like quite a bit. But you're looking at what has been a very competitive rivalry, which has been in favor of Medvedev 7-5, with Sinner winning 5 of the last 6. Point is, though, usually close matches, usually at least one marathon set, and on top of that, both career Grand Slam meetings did go to 5 sets, and both of them were this year. So give me the over, 36.5, couple ways to get there, -115, though I like as a price. I'll take that as my lock. For my dog, I mentioned before, I'm going to double down, but I am going to go with a parlay. I did take Sinner once again over 3.5 sets, so I am going to go with a different total play. Still the over, but I'm going to go with a different approach. Give me the over 3.5 sets in the Sinner match, parlayed with the over 3.5 sets in the de Minaur match, and that pays out a +138 on BetRivers. Couple reasons why I'm going to go with that. I'm going to repeat the stats I mentioned before for the lock. 4 of the last 5 meetings between them did not end in straight sets, and they also faced off twice in Grand Slams. Both meetings went to 5 sets. So both guys tend to bring out the best in each other, and you tend to see a lot of really tense moments for both guys. And I do think with that being the case, you're looking at what should be at least a 4-set match. Sinner's been better recently, but I really wasn't totally impressed by how he played against Paul. He got better as the match went on, but that forehand was a problem early on, and he was down a double break. So I do think you're looking at a spot where Medvedev can definitely win a set here, and I think he can potentially win the match. So give me the over 3.5 sets on that one. For de Minaur, pretty self-explanatory. He has been dropping sets despite winning. He has lost at least 1 set in 4 of his last 5 matches, and if you want to go back even to the head-to-head, it definitely benefits the over because they have 3 career head-to-head meetings, and all 3 meetings did not end in straight sets. De Minaur did win all 3 meetings, but Draper did have moments winning at least 1 set in all 3 of them. So I think you're looking at a spot where de Minaur and Draper should have a rally-off where every point's going to be like 20-plus shots, and whoever makes the unforced error first is going to lose. But de Minaur tends to have more overall stamina and quickness, so I think he's going to win the match. But Draper is still dangerous as a lefty. He has a pretty solid serve out wide, and he has been able to capitalize, at least for 1 set against Draper, with his serve, and I think that's going to be the case once again in this one. But de Minaur has dropped the set quite often. He has once again just been all over the place for at least 1 set, dropping a set to Thompson, dropping a set to Evans, dropping a set to Giron. I think Draper can fit the, I'd say, overall build of a guy that would be able to win a set against de Minaur on these courts here. And he has not dropped a set in the event, so he has been playing very good tennis. So give me the over 3.5 sets here, keeping the head-to-head tradition alive, and I think you're going to see a marathon in that match as well. So once again, my picks for the quarterfinals here in the U.S. Open, my lock's going to be on Medvedev and Sinner over 36.5 games, -115. That line should move pretty heavily. I would take the over now, personally. And for the dog, I am going to go with a 2-big parlay. Give me the over 3.5 sets in the Sinner match, parlayed with the over 3.5 sets in the de Minaur match, and that pays out at +138. A reminder once again, to like, subscribe on YouTube, and a reminder to leave a rating review on the podcast if you are listening to it on Spotify or Apple. A reminder, though, we also did the women's episode before this. If you want some bonus picks, check out the podcast that I recorded about 2 hours before this for the women's predictions for the quarterfinals. For the update for the actual schedule, this is when they start staggering the men's and women's on days. So the next episode will be women's only for the semis because they're giving the men an extra day off, give or take. So the point is women's semis will be a day early. You'll have the women's semis, men's semis, women's final. That's it. So now we actually have separation for men's and women's tennis matches in the next couple rounds. So we're going to go with one episode a day, focusing on whatever card is, present the next day. Point is, though, that's going to be the game plan for the remainder of the event. Till next time, though, you can find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio, find me on the NBA show, find me on the WWE show as well, and find me on the MLB show as well. Till next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.